معي.
المؤتمر الوطني للشباب تحت
The National Conference for Youth under the auspices of His Excellency President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi. President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, Your Excellency President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, ladies and gentlemen, let me welcome you all to the simulated model of the Egyptian state, which has been an output and exercise done regularly, innovatively done by the Youth Forum for young people to apply what they have already studied at the presidential grooming course. This year's simulated model of the Egyptian state this year is introducing something novelty, something new, which will be a simulated dialogue among five top students who have already completed the presidential course at the presidential grooming course for leaderships on the one hand, and top leaders of the country on the other. Your Excellency President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, ladies and gentlemen, the simulated model of the Egyptian state is intended for presidential course students to assess the political, social and economic situations of Egypt in the light of the ongoing economic reform embarked on by the Egyptian government, including all other plans. They will be reviewing as well social safety procedures, which are still coupling the economic reform program. They will also be probing ongoing procedures for digitization and governance. What your excellencies are going to watch now will be an output, a final output, preceded by weeks long of workshops, courses, lectures by students who have been enrolled in the presidential grooming. Dialogue at this session, which will be running for 90 minutes, will be covering the following. Number one, the agenda of this dialogue will first of all cover the situation, an overview of the general situation, number one, and then the economic reform procedures. The moderators of the session will be responsible, will take charge of taking the floor from someone and giving the floor to another one, with His Excellency President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi being the judge of all moderators, and will be entitled, of course, to intervene should the need arise for him to intervene and make his own intervention.
ملف الاقتصاد هو دايما الملف الأهم بالنسبة لأي دولة، وخصوصا دولة زي مصر. واجهت تحديات متنوعة في كل الملفات في الفترة الأخيرة، وواحدة من التحديات
and gentlemen are watching a documentary film on Egypt's economic reform. The narrator, the film female narrator, is telling the story of Egypt's economic reform. That says, in a nutshell, what she's saying has to do with the need that Egypt has embarked on economic reform in recent years because it has had to embark on such an long delayed economic reform. Mega projects have been imperative. We must have embarked on mega projects, and people and the government has also embarked, coupled with the economic reform, has embarked on a policy of building a new fourth generation of new cities, including the new administrative capital where this conference in particular is being held tonight, supporting small and medium-scale enterprises by offering loans to young people to build or to launch their own small-scale and medium-scale enterprises. All these including, for example, building or setting up a leather production city on the outskirts of Cairo, metropolitan Cairo. Of course, the government, according to the film, is recognizing, is admitting that the economic reform has been biting hard into the lives of average Egyptian people. But however, the Egyptian people have shown willingness to endure the pinch of the economic reform because they want to contribute to the building of their own country. Of course, Egypt, the Egyptian government has also been interested in diversifying its sources of energy because we were in a dire need for diversifying such energies because of the overburden on the electric power grid. Egypt's government, Egypt in general, the Egyptian state has had to address daunting challenges. But more daunting than these challenges have been our accomplishments. Having watched this film, we are going now to listen to the Prime Minister, the mock Prime Minister of the simulated model of the Egyptian state is introducing the mock or simulated model of the Egyptian state. He's introducing himself and he's going now to review the general economic overview of the Egyptian state. He's saying that he represents the real Prime Minister, and he's telling the audience that there are five axes on which he is assessing the security situation, saying that by the year 2014, 200 terrorist attacks had taken place. So the Egyptian government has to clamp more heavily and more harshly down on such clandestine organizations working discreetly in order to find them and eliminate them. And then he's probing on the economic reform program. He's quoting economic growth as having grown to 2.9% of economic growth rather than 1.8%
16 69 من ل 16 69 مليار دولار بعد ما كان 35 مليار دولار
He's
عام
quoting
2010.
figures that the monetary reserve of the country in the years in the wake of the 2011 revolution had reached to unprecedented lows. Now the national monetary reserve has risen back to its normal figures of 30-something, 40-something billion Egyptian pounds.
وصلت اغلب الاسر تحت خط الفقر الى 27.8%. الزياده السكانيه سجلت متوسط 2.4%.
Households overburdened by poverty, or rather living under poverty belt were estimated by the year 2014 at 27.8%. Transport sector, railway transport sector, for example, had declined steeply by the year 2014, until the government has embarked on its economic reform and overall reform program. Railways, locomotives have been declining, have been in bad repair. Now we have seen, ladies and gentlemen, the Egyptian government has, ever since 2014, has put in place a plan, has drawn up a plan to put the country back on its well-deserved, well-merited position. Now the curve now shows how economic growth has been growing over these years, 5 or 6 past years. The curve has been rising, has been steeply rising since the economic reform program was launched by the government, with unemployment declining to unprecedented lows.
الى 16 حوالي 16 مليار. احنا النهارده الاحتياطي النقدي الاجنبي 44 مليار دولار.
Today's monetary reserves are estimated at about 44 billion US dollars rather than 16 million dollars. A low ebb of $16 million 6 years ago or 5. Aim that all information has to reach out to all people, including grassroots. I'm only going here to comment on reactions, on public reactions to the lifting of subsidy. We're going to see these caricatures together and laugh at it together, laugh at them together. Any government. Of course, President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi saying that, well, the government's hands were not trembling when taking this decision. But however, when the government, any government, not necessarily the Egyptian government, has to take the interests of people well into consideration when making an important decision.
لما بنقول ان البطل الحقيقي اللي هو اللي كاتب الكوميكس ده واللي معلق وعامل تعليقات قد كده 100 مره، اللي هو بيسخر من الحاله ومن الظروف، ما هو ده اللي يستحمل برضه. هو كاتب كده.
Well, the one actually, the real hero is the people. Even the one who has written these social media comics, he's one. Even he has written, has critically have been satirical of the government in his own comics posted on the internet. He himself is a hero because he has been enduring the economic reform.
حتى النتائج اللي انت عايز توصل لها، لانك انت دي كتل لما تتحرك تعمل مشكله كبيره.
We have had to satisfy the public, because the public is composed of large blocks of people, large blocks of stakeholders who, if moving, will make trouble. So the government, before taking any decision, I've always been telling my government that before taking any major decision, you have to think thoroughly of what the public reaction to your decision will be, in order to cushion the impact on the public, on average people.
الإجابة بتاعت رئيس الوزراء الشاب قال إن إحنا هنشكل لجنة إدارة الأزمة. مصطفى أنا عارف. فقال إن إحنا هنشكل لجنة في الموضوعات اللي زي كده. لا، الموضوعات اللي زي كده لا تشكل لها.
Actually, I have to comment on the answer made by the Prime Minister, by mock Prime Minister Mustafa, who said that regarding such and such issues, we are going to form committees. Actually, on such important economic issues, you can't tackle such important economic issues by forming committees. Egypt has been gripped by constant and continued crises in the area of petroleum products, for example. Our reserves, for example, of petroleum products wouldn't have sustained us, wouldn't have lasted for long to help us to meet consumption. We have been only working to spin out the reserves we have to last Egypt, or to continue to help meet public needs for 14 or 15 days. The government has been working on important tracks, important files, and the government's or the state's capability to predict, to forecast how these crises, how these situations are going to impact. The more the country, the more the state is capable of predicting the public impact, the public reaction to such issues, the more or the less harsh the impact of these economic reforms will be. Well, let's for example look at the situation at the petroleum or at the field situation. For example, this is real. There are about 9 to 10 million vehicles moving along roads Egypt per day. Imagine how much fuel is needed for these 9 to 10 million vehicles moving along roads. If we haven't stocked up enough fuel, enough petroleum products in order to meet these rising needs of cars, these rising needs of vehicles, there would have been a gross shortage, a very sharp shortage, which wouldn't have been able to face up to. Now we have been working on recycling stations in order to recycle sewage water. We have been now, rather than initially talking of biorecycling, we have now been talking about dry recycling. That's to say, recycling sewage or sewage water 3 times rather than 2 times before pumping them into the network before. I'm not telling secrets which shouldn't have been divulged to the public. No, I'm telling you what the real government and I myself have been talking about. We have to think about the shortage of water, which will be withheld every year because of the dams being built across the Nile River. We have been doing real serious and earnest studies on how to deal with this crisis of water shortage. Your recommendation. You are making recommendations, but for every recommendation to be turned into real procedures. This takes a lot of time, a lot of effort. This is a splendid recommendation by way your recommendation. You've made, Your Excellency made a splendid recommendation when you said that we should reallocate 10 feddan for every individual in order to provide utilities to land and give this plots of land to people in order to start up their own industrial businesses. Well, this is not, the matter is not that this is perfect, but in order for this recommendation or proposal turned into real procedures, this takes a lot of effort and a lot of time. We at the last year we made a recommendation at the sixth youth conference. We have adopted a recommendation made by that conference. You made the recommendation that more factories should be built. Yes, this splendid has been perfect, but however, in order to turn this recommendation into reality, it will cost the government more than 10 billion Egyptian pounds, of course excluding the price of land and allocation of land. So I'm requesting you all, when you make recommendations, that every recommendation should be based on scientific basis, on professional basis, and I have seen you all base your recommendation on these two. Yes. Public opinion, of course, is taken well into the consideration of the government. It has been the public opinion which has prompted the government to defer economic reforms for the past 40 years. The harsh economic reforms we have already introduced should have been implemented 40 years earlier. Now we are going to move another axis of appraising the economic reforms. Another sub-axis is to assess mega projects. The government, we have seen, ladies and gentlemen, we have seen the government taking important procedures. We are going to watch a documentary film on the network of roads recently built by the government, and then we are going to give the floor to Her Excellency the Minister, the mock Minister of Planning. He's going to talk to us about this new network of roads.
كان التكليف التاريخي من المصريين كمل جميل، وكانت المسؤولية عظيمة، وكان الحمل كبير، وكان حلمه أكبر، كان التحدي فوق التصور، وكانت البداية من نقطة الصفر.
وكانت البنية التحتية متهالكة تماماً وبقالها سنين من غير حلول جذرية وعايشة على المسكنات. وفين تكون كرامة المصريين وهم في البيئة دي؟
ازرعوا الأمل في نفوس الناس. أول خطوة من 1000 خطوة.
وفي أوقات قياسية بدأت الدولة في تنفيذ مشروع الشبكة القومية للطرق بهدف تحسين ورفع كفاءة الطرق القديمة، وكمان إنشاء طرق جديدة للعمل على تسهيل حركة التنقلات وسهولتها والربط بين محافظات الجمهورية، وكمان بناء مجتمعات عمرانية جديدة.
urban communities.
وأصبح عندنا شبكة طرق حديثة على أحدث المعايير الدولية من حيث الاتساع وسلامة الإنشاء وكمان الخدمات، وتم تنفيذ عدد كبير من الكباري على الطرق بالإضافة لمحاور لربط المناطق الموجودة على جانبي النيل، ده بخلاف الكباري الأخرى من أهمها وبدأنا أول خطوة في مشوار المستقبل. بقى عندنا شبكة طرق هتخلينا ننفذ الأحلام ونشوفها على أرض الواقع.
اشتغلوا، ابنوا، عمروا عشان تسيبوا لأولادكم دولة.
القيام بمثل هذه المشروعات. الاقتصاد المصري قبل 2014 كان بتواجهه تحديات كبيرة جدا، وعلى رأسها حاجة زي معدل البطالة اللي وصل حوالي.
Now the Minister of Planning is assessing the economic reform situation of the government.
وعشان كده الحكومة كان لازم تتدخل وتبدأ هي تدفع عجلة الإنتاج مرة تانية.
The government has had to intervene in order to push forward production, to accelerate production. That's why the government has to think of new projects in order to build a new infrastructure and to raise growth rates, as well as engage the private sector more actively, into the activities of the governments. Let's review some of the important one important, the mock Minister of Planning is saying that on top of these important mega projects has been the new Suez Canal, which has cost the country 60-something billion Egyptian dollars, which has been subscribed by the general public, who bought relevant bonds in order to provide finance to this new canal. We have built some tunnels under the Suez Canal, below the Suez Canal, to carry water and to carry railway roads into Sinai. New ducts have been built, new ports, new harbors, farms have been set up dotted along the country. So, even the new administrative city, the new administrative capital, has been thought of in order to connect together, to be the hub. So the administrative city has been intended to be the hub at the center of all those new projects. Mega projects have to be connected together at the center by this new administrative city, this new administrative capital. And we do hope to introduce more projects, mega projects. Now let's take your issue of mega projects, Your Excellency, the Minister of Planning, to the round table access in order to have your discussions appraised and evaluated.
السادة الحضور، لقد قامت الدولة المصرية منذ عام 2015 بالعديد من الحلول الجذرية لحل المشكلات.
Now, a member of the round table is going to appraise by addressing His Excellency President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, reviewing the country's mega projects by saying that the government has been progressing towards introducing mega projects in order to push forward production and accelerate production.
قمنا بعمل دراسة عن الدول التي قامت بسبقتنا في مجال سلامة النقل.
Having seen the recurring and frequent road accidents, have been a lot of them taking place along roads since 2015. Egypt's government has thought of building a new transport infrastructure, because the present infrastructure was not good enough, causing these series of accidents. So the government has introduced a body to be the umbrella under which has gathered, has collected all transport related with a maritime or road related transport. Investigation groups have been introduced in order to identify the culprits in any transport accident, and there have been also safety groups in addition to investigation groups, and safety groups are intended to be precautionary ones which are going to help to save people in order to avert such accidents before they even occur. We have been working hard in order to provide safety before the project is launched, and even in progress while the project is launched and after the progress has been completed. And finally, we are proposing that a higher council for the safety of transport be set up in Egypt to supervise all forms of transport in Egypt, including maritime, land and aviation transport in the country. Before moving to experts, let's have a look at the solution proposed by the Coordination Committee of Young People. Now the floor is given to the Coordination Committee. Someone is making an intervention that we do agree with Her Excellency the Minister of Planning that all these mega projects have been imperative for the country, have been much needed and direly needed ones. The mega projects reviewed by my colleague on the mock government have been all vital ones and indispensable ones. However, I'm going to build on His Excellency President Fattah el-Sisi by saying that average people still do not feel how serious, how vital and feasible these projects, mega projects, including recycling water stations, are, because people haven't yet perceived how vital, how feasible they are or will be for him in the future. We have a vision to spell out. Our vision is that any government, any country, any state should build roads, should lay more emphasis on roads, because any country should do this. And we agree, we also recognize that the government has been doing enormous efforts, vast efforts, in order to provide for all facilities by building the new administrative city, which will be a center or hub for business and finance, rather than only a residential area. And finally, because we have had to do all these procedures in order to attract, to lure more foreign investment into the country, and any government should target investment. However, there should be more communication between the government on the one hand and average people on the other, in order to let people know how serious these mega projects have been. We should take more serious procedures. However, an average person, average citizen should feel the seriousness, the earnestness of these projects. Well, your points, the points you have raised are so important, but we are suggesting that these important points be included in final recommendations to be made by the conference. Well, thank you very much to the Youth Coordination Committee. Now the real Minister of Planning is making her own comments. Well, since we have started our economic reform since November 2016. So we are talking by saying that economic reform dates back only to November 2016. We'll be talking about a very short time frame, very short timeline. When you embark on economic reforms, you have to wait for a longer period of time for an average person to feel the positive impact of the economic reform drive. I'm a professor of economics in reality. Before being a minister, I'm a professor of economics. So to talk about real and genuine economic reform, we have to continue on, we have to sustain our economic reform drive in order to be able to go to walk on feet. We are just like in doing economic reform, our handling of the economic reform is just like a patient who had only two options, is to remain ill, unable to walk in his own feet again, or undergoing a surgical operation, a much needed surgical operation, which will, of course, will leave him after the operation in much pain and agony. But later on, after the agony and pain of the surgery, he will be able again to stand on his own feet. Of course, we know, we as a government, we recognize as a government that the economic reform has been harsh, but we have been working hard to generate thousands of jobs, job opportunities every year. And in doing so, we are providing a cushion for these harsh economic reforms. We have been fighting poverty. And then give me opportunity to explain to the young in 1 minute. Leave the government to speak. Let me talk to you about the research done by the real government on expenditure and income. This research has been done by the government over the past years. This research need not produce indicators for poverty, but however it provides smaller scale indicators on which we can figure out income, figure out. Our researchers would go to diverse households to see how do they spend their own money, to know their own patterns of spending on their own needs. This research has been done since 2017, and actually this research has been done immediately in the wake of our economic reform. Now our inflation rate stands at 8.9%. So if we are looking at figures, we have to see these figures in their own real context. This research gives us positive as well as negative findings and indicators. Of course, we are going to work and build on these positive findings and results. And again, and as far as negative results and negative findings or negative indicators are concerned, we are going to work on them in order to help address and remedy these negative indicators as well. This research, of course, the media, the media haven't focused yet on this research on expenditure. Were it not for programs for social safety, 80% of the subsidies lifted have already been channeled into the more, to help the more vulnerable. Otherwise, poverty indicators would have risen further up. Income and expenditure research, the previous research on expenditure and income shows lower figures, lower positive results. Energy subsidies offered by the Egyptian state, 70%. In the previous research, only according to the previous research, only the higher classes, the higher strata of society would capitalize on subsidies. Now we have lifted subsidies in order to help the lower classes, the more vulnerable people to benefit from these already lifted subsidies which have been channeled into them. Poverty, yes, we have to admit that poverty has risen by 4%, but these cannot be taken as a negative indicator because it has been on a very short time range. Thank you very much, and I'm sorry for talking lengthily. So we do hope that following researches would show more positive results. His Excellency, the Prime Minister is going to talk further on the economic reforms. I do hope that all interventions are going to reiterate our need are going to lend further needed support to these economic reforms. As a mock government, we have developed a strategy bringing into full play capacities and capabilities of more young people. And let me, Your Excellency, show you shed more light on the importance of government-done efforts in order to promote the government's efforts towards economic reform. Actually, average citizens wouldn't have lent support to these economic reform efforts had it not been for the government sharing or giving explanation or justifying these procedures why they have been taken. Otherwise, people would have turned deaf ears to these economic reforms. So we have had to explain to them why these economic reforms have been taken. And this is the major hurdle. We have to shed more light. We have to unblock all communication channels between the government on the one hand and the general public on the other, for the general public to know why these procedures have been taken and what kind of procedures to be taken in the future in order to help them. By doing so, we have turned in from promoting government promotion to ministerial promotion. That's to say, rather than the entire government will be promoting its efforts, every ministry alone will be promoting its own efforts in order to promote and to make public and get the general public more and more acquainted with what's being done, either by campaigns, directing the media to launch media campaigns every 3 or every 4 months in order to make the public more knowledgeable. We have to shed light on the benefits of these economic reforms. For example, I can't as a government tell the people do so and so and do not do so and so without telling the public why you are telling them. I have to address people's minds. We have to appeal to people's minds and intellects rather than their own emotions in order to fully convince them and bring the general public into full play and to help them. With what aim? What do you aim by doing so? What's your aim by doing so? The moderator is intervening. Yes, our only aim is that the entire system will be working harmoniously together, because we have been, well, actually, huge and vast accomplishments have been made in Egypt. Unprecedented accomplishments have been introduced, but still the general public do not know much about them. The general public does not know much about these accomplishments because the media have not been bringing these accomplishments and achievements into into sharper focus. We have to talk also about the restructuring of the entire system. We have to introduce a common identify a joint identity of the government. We introduce a government promotion committee. A government promotion committee will be mainly concerned, will be assigned with all. Is going to harmonize all the positions of diverse ministries, so that the general public would be feeling that the government will be talking, or is talking already, in one voice. No ministry should be allowed to conflict with other ministries in declaring their positions on a common issue of public interest. Thank you. Thank you to the minister. I believe that what the lady has said, the intervention made, would be beneficial to the Prime Minister. Now let's move to another axis on the assessment of the economic reform program, supporting the Vocational Training Center. Let's move to the Minister of Trade and Industry. Superpowers. We have seen superpowers have built their own economic capacities, economic capabilities by lending further support to small and medium-sized enterprises. So what have your government done exactly in supporting these? Well, I'm going now to spell out our vision on these. We have already been supporting, giving further support to innovation, creation, and briefly I'm going now to review the present situation. we have to look at the figures now. I'm going now to show you figures on the economic, on the industrial growth rate.
الحمد لله دلوقتي نوصل لمعدل نمو 6.3 بإجمالي 19%.
Our industrial growth rate is now estimated at 6.3%. This chart shows that during the year 2017-2018, we have posted a deficit of exports, but however, our exports do still have access to a lot of countries. The state in the previous period has taken good procedures in support of small and medium-scale projects. With the government allocated millions of square meters, has allocated a large swath of land to support industrial projects. So the state has also recently set up an agency, an apparatus for supporting small, medium, as well as micro projects. This agency is now assigned with supervising, overseeing all and supporting, of course, all these projects. We have also allocated more than 14 million Egyptian pounds in support of such projects by providing, the state has also unleashed an initiative in support of such small and medium-scale projects. There, of course, there are still there have been challenges looming high and large over the industrial sector. For example, we have to tackle industrial activities in Upper Egypt, which are still lacking. In support of what you said, we need to make an initiative. We have to create more. We are working hard as well on Egyptian products replacing imports. We are also working hard. We have been working hard in order to create more job opportunities. Secondly, these briefly speaking, I'm going to spell out another vision for our vision for the industrial sector is to provide to lay emphasis on green industry, ships, as well as industrial machines as well. And these industries have been selected because they are fitting. They have been found to be fitting, to be appropriate with all the resources we have. First, again, I'd like also to offer my heartfelt thanks to the Egyptian labor, because we need to train our training facilities run by the Ministry of Trade and Industry. Thank you, Your Excellency, the Minister. Sorry for interruption. We have to strike a balance between the time allocated to each of Your Excellencies. Now, a question to the panel of jury. First, please give Your Excellency give us examples of the policies to be adopted by the government in the foreseeable future. I haven't heard the question. I'm sorry. The question is being posed to you by the panel of jury. Could you please give us practical examples? The panel of jury, which is presided over by His Excellency President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, is making this question to Your Excellency. give example? Could you please give? They are asking you, the jury members are asking Your Excellency to give examples of the policies you wish or you suggest for the government to apply next year. We have been thinking that the best thing to do is to follow the initiative of Egypt 20 by the year 2030, because the government and all other agencies have been working on this plan. This is the plan. The plan, Egypt 2030 plan, is the one we are working on. So when we started to think of a plan, we found that the best thing is to take this route. Maybe, well, actually some people would wonder, are we going to live, to be alive until the year 2030? Are we going to live up to the year 2030? However, we have to work on the plan for us now and for other generations to follow us as well. We have to work on this as government, as people, and so on. This is the other thing. As the other point, important point in our strategy is to unify the identity. We have to unify the identity of all ministries. We can't let the ministry. We can't let each ministry have its own logo, for example. No, because we have to identify the logo of the Egyptian government, because we are addressing the entire world. So the logo have to be the same among all, or representing all the ministries, and to be translated to this logo has to be in Arabic and English as well. This branding should apply to all other produce, to all electronic sites. So we are thinking of dividing the ministries into a set of groups. Each group should have its own logo on the website. So it will be like this, as shown here on the screen. And the logo of Egypt 2030 will be continuing on with this. For example, the logo of the Ministry of Tourism will be in this red or blue, and then the Ministry of Education will have a logo in red, for example. The other thing we are going to talk about is it's only a small thing which I am going to show you today. The government platforms we have to be unified. Have to be unified so that we'll be talking the same language of applying the initiative of, or the program of Egypt 2030. So we have to address all people in the same language, by using the same language. Everyone should be addressed in the same language. This have been mainly. Now let me ask the jury, is the answer clear to Your Excellencies?
I think that this might be another party to the simulation, especially that this element of government marketing is subject to a lot of debate. So would you please give 1 minute to the researchers of the Egyptian Center for Strategic Studies to clarify what they think under government promotion? Excuse me. Certain things, and we do not want to forget what Noura Obeid said, because the team that worked with her is more than 40 young men and young women who worked together for a lot of months. And when she wanted to introduce examples to you, you thought that it is just that. If you want to see things in an integrated manner, the Studies Center can do the coordination and do an integrated presentation of the whole idea, because the idea as it is presented now is not enough. Maybe the time given to the idea is not that clear. I have sat with them for 6 hours for them to introduce to me what they did, and here they try to make it as brief as possible. So even the idea and the plan, it cannot be mentioned on air. Thank you. Excuse me, I wish that the Secretariat now would give the recommendations for item 1, evaluation of the economic reform program. These recommendations are developed by the experts of the National Center for Strategic Studies and the jury. These are the results of the most important points that were discussed up till now during this session. Now let's move on to another file regarding the economic reform. It is the opportunities of supporting the economic reform. How can we support this reform? How can we achieve the targets mentioned by the Minister of Planning, Dr. Hala Said? This won't happen except through a number of files. The first file is urban development and the fourth generation cities. Now we'll listen to a speech from the Minister of Housing in the simulation government on urban development. Thank you. Your Excellency the President, distinguished guests, I will review with you 3 main files in the Ministry of Housing. I will start, as Amr said, with urban development, and I will add to it the one word, integrated. In the previous years, we used to hear about new cities, and we have the first, the second, and the third generation cities. They are about 24 cities. Yet these cities had an occupancy rate that did not exceed 20%, and they costed 75 billion Egyptian pounds. But because of lacking an integrated vision, these cities do not meet the needs it was built for. That's why after 2014, the state has an integrated opinion. That's why we're talking about integrated urban development, targeting not only constructing cities but also roads. We have reached 1,600 kilometers with a cost of 9 billion Egyptian pounds, in addition to facilities and like water and wastewater. And we worked also on housing projects, the important project, the housing project. If we look at 2014, we find that between 2005 up till 2014, we had 383 housing units, and they were not enough because population increase reached 2.5%. And this had great impact on the agricultural lands and led to the reduction of the agricultural lands. And also we had the problem of informal settlements that reached about 357 settlements, and it kept increasing up till 2014 when the state put a plan to put an end to slums and informal settlements, so we were able to build 182,000 housing units. And another indirect impact of the housing project is that during the second half of 2018, we created 300,000 job opportunities. Another important file is the real estate exports. Now, real estate exports is the future of foreign investments. But we have a number of challenges. The most important is we do not have accurate database for real estate in Egypt. So the investor won't be able to achieve his target except through a strong, reliable database. Secondly, we have a problem with Law 14 for the year 2012, preventing foreigners from owning lands in Sinai. We have other challenges that we try to overcome through the participation of the private sector in development. Here we had the idea of a project that we, the youth government, want to work on. Developing the Mediterranean coast through building a new city. This city would be in an area that has a historical value, to make it an added value to the project and to target using the modern technology for sustainable cities. Where would it be? In Ras Tin. We will upgrade Ras Tin for 2.7 kilometers in length and about 1.2 meters square. And we establish a number of lakes. You will have something like a corniche, and it would be connected to the corniche of Alexandria up till the desert road. And we will have residential areas and commercial areas, and we will have towers of 22 stories up till 52 stories. In addition to open areas and parks, the estimated cost is 8 billion Egyptian pounds. The economic feasibility of the project is achieving direct return of 155 million Egyptian pounds over 10 years. The net is 147 million Egyptian pounds. And I will leave you to watch the video, and then we'll answer any questions if you have. Now the colleagues in the Secretariat once more can collect the recommendations and the opinions to go back to the juries to announce them afterwards. Up till now we're still talking about housing. Let's move on to the Coordination Office for the Youth of Political Parties to listen to the opinion of the Minister of Housing in the simulation government. Amira Saber, the Egyptian Social Democratic Party. In fact, regarding housing and the policy of safe real estate and urban development, Egypt needs to develop a strategy to deal with this file, to regulate the market of rentals and protect also the renting contract, also putting a framework for settling disputes between the landlords and the people. We need a system for rentals in every place, as well as cooperation with the local units, and these local councils would put a ceiling for the rental to secure the rights of all parties. Thank you very much. And now let's move on to the researchers in the Egyptian Center for Strategic Studies on Urban Development. Your Excellency, the President, Dr. Omar Al-Husseini, researcher in the Egyptian Center for Strategic Studies. I've listened to the presentation of the Minister of Housing in the simulation government. We agree with you regarding the achievements you've attained as a government in the field of urban development. But there are still certain points that we need to know more about. When you work on a project like the administrative capital or New Alamein city or the project that you showed us right now in the video, when the citizen sees it, he asks, is this city for me or for the investor, and is it a foreign or a local investor, and do I have the purchasing power to enable me to be in that place, and can I reside in this place? He wants to hear about these things and not just the economic returns. This is what the citizen needs if you are talking about government proportion. So we need to put all our strategies together here. The Ministry of Housing is using the same plan and applying these principles that were mentioned. So we need to take into consideration different categories and segments of the society and not only one segment. The second part has to do with infrastructure. We mentioned that we have first, second, third generation cities, but we do not want to repeat the same mistakes we saw in the old cities for the new cities. When I come to talk about infrastructure, up till now, we do not have the level of required services for real sustainable development. Now, for example, the wastewater of grayish water with brackish water is not that clear, and up till now we do not have tertiary treatment of wastewater. Would I depend on groundwater or not? And in order not to be lengthy, I will mention the last part, also the solid wastes. Do we have the same problem with collecting the solid wastes and the relation between the informal garbage collector and the formal garbage companies? And regarding the video for Racetin, do you have environment impact studies that show how can we protect the sustainability of this project for hundreds of years? Is this site the right site or not? There would be one comment from the Minister of Housing, but this comment would be written and the Secretariat would take it to the researcher. Thank you. I would like to remind you that at the beginning of this session of the simulation model, we talked about an urgent case for the simulation government, and this was due to the development of disputes and conflicts between international and regional powers. One of the countries closed one of the waterways through which oil vessels pass from the production areas to the distribution areas, which led to reduction in the flow of derivatives to the country and an increase in oil prices. Now we will listen to the reply of the simulation government. As we told Mr. Amr, we will form a crisis team that has identified three determinants. First, the containment of it, preventing it from aggravation, as well as the management of the internal crisis. And we came up with a number of procedures to be done by the different ministries. One, the Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of Oil would look at the future contracts, as well as supporting diplomatic channels with the powers and parties to the conflict, and the allies, be it at the regional or international levels, to rationalize oil consumption and raising the awareness of the citizens about this goal. For implementation of alternative plans to face this threat that are identified according to the strategic projections. Fifth and last, international movement to deal with this threats, international peace and security, and calling the international powers to protect and secure the maritime navigation in these areas. These are the main procedures that would be undertaken by the simulation government. Thank you very much. In this reply, let's go also to the jury to listen to their opinion about the reply made by the simulation government. Thank you very much. You find that this is a complicated issue that has two dimensions, an internal plan and a plan for regional and international action. I expected the simulation government to be more perceptive, especially that a very important point was mentioned, that crises of that type need to have proactive and ready plans in the state institutions, and the Prime Minister of the simulation government did not talk about this. We have a number of remarks that would be mentioned by my colleagues from the jury. We'll start with the international dimension first. Thank you very much, Mr. Mustafa, the Prime Minister of the simulation. In fact, facing any crisis of that type should be based on the vision of the Egyptian political leadership in dealing with such crises. And this vision has a number of determinants. I'm saying so because when you put the plan, the whole vision should be clear. A large number of determinants. I will focus on three main ones. The first, that Egypt's status is the protection of peace and security of the region. The second determinant, and is an important one as well, is the preparedness of Egypt to play a regional and international role to put an end to this crisis or to limit its aggravation. And this can be done because Egypt today is supporting in solving most of the international and regional crises. Thirdly, the Egyptian political leadership on limiting the influence of any external crisis on internal positions. You need to take into consideration also a number of elements. The first element is time. The second is a clear mechanism for action at regional and international levels so that it can be influential and effective. The third determinant, and it is an important one, is accurate selection of the states we would deal with. The regional powers, is it only the parties to this crisis, or other oil-producing powers, or powers suffering from the crisis? The last point, if this crisis might extend over a longer period and would influence the Arab security, then we might consider holding an urgent Arab summit. Before talking about the internal position, you said calling international powers to secure navigation in waterways. I think that this is a matter to be reconsidered. Thank you very much. Thank you, the jury. Now let's move on to Prime Minister Dr. Mustafa Madbouli to comment on these points. In the name of God, the most merciful, the most compassionate, Your Excellency, the President, distinguished guests, I'm so glad with everything that was mentioned during this session. And although we as a government know different points that would be discussed today, but what happened really today is new to us. We found a lot of new things that we did not know about before, and this reflects credibility of this simulation. There was an opportunity for the simulation government to present its opinion regarding the economic reform program. Let me tell you that the economic reform programs are always programs that need a political vision, political will, and the determination of the nation to achieve these economic reform steps. There are a lot of countries that started steps and faced setbacks because they did not have the will to continue these painful programs that have adverse effect on the short term. Maybe the president referred to the fact that sometimes we measure the reactions and we need to be aware of it. And this was a question that I, a citizen, used to ask before assuming a post. I was a citizen who used to ask why the decision to increase the oil price 10 piastres every year was not made instead of having to do it now. The point mentioned by the president was that at a certain time the studies used to say that there would be negative reactions in the street. That's why each government avoided dealing with this file. And as the Minister of Planning said, they used to do sedatives instead of making reform. But if I want Egypt in short years to be compared to Korea, Malaysia, and China, and to achieve the progress, then we need to adopt an economic reform program. The studies used to say first that this economic reform led to that in number of countries the poverty rate increased by 10 or 15%. So while we were 28%, we could have exceeded 40% as poverty rate, and we would recognize that this would happen during the first 2 or 3 years of the reform program. If it was not for the procedures we took and the social protection program that we would talk about during the second session, and during the period, as the minister said, all the increase was just 4%. So according to all scientific studies and according to all the academia, this is a great accomplishment that the state is capable of controlling the economic reform to achieve growth and also create job opportunities and prevent the poverty rate increase highly. There is a figure mentioned by the minister. The unemployment rate reached 13%. Now we're talking about 8.1%. During this period, the number of population increased annually, 2 million annually. This means that I've not solved just the gap of the 5%, but I've added also additional job opportunities for the new population. So we were able to create job opportunities to reduce the gap and assimilate the increase of labor market. So the achievement accomplished here is unprecedented, and it is not us who say so, but all international organizations say this and say that Egypt now is a success story for the whole world, how a state did an economic reform program. Let me disagree with the point that the citizen does not feel the result of the economic reform. No, he feels. And when we look at this, maybe we in Egypt forget the problem. Didn't the citizen feel that the problem of electricity that we had 4 years ago was solved? The queues of cars in front of the oil and the petroleum stations. As His Excellency the President said, I used to have reserve for diesel for a few days, and afterwards I don't know whether I would be able to provide it or not. We have solved a chronic problem, and it is the housing problem. This used to be a dilemma for any family. If a young man and young woman wants to get married, they used to face this problem. So this is an important part. Haven't we noticed that we solved the problem of 200,000 families who used to live in slums, informal settlements, and unfortunately, we used to see a lot of films made in this saying that this is how the Egyptians live. Now these places disappear. We can see, for example, that the triangle of Maspero was supposed to be developed since the 70s, and the state is changing it now. We are not doing it because just of being embarrassed of these areas. No, we wanted to go to the citizen who used to suffer in these places and give him hope for a better life, so that we can go and live in a decent place. And the president is telling us now not only to construct a housing unit but also to furnish it so that he would move to a new place and he and his children would have hope for a new future. The health initiatives, and we'll talk about them. Hundreds of thousands of surgeries were done, the hepatitis C campaign. This all makes the citizen have hope today and is enduring the economic reform because he believes there is hope. And there are studies I've read when we ask anyone who's complaining that prices are high, when we ask him, do you see that things are improving? He would say, no, things are improving. And I'm not saying this as an official, but there are studies, public polls that say so. Going back to the urgent case, and the president said that these are all confidential things and we cannot talk about. The government, of course, has an idea for these urgent cases, and it has its plans, and these plans, whether they are implemented or under implementation, are there and ready so that we can deal with such difficulties. Industry, we've talked about it for industry. When we look at the past 20 years, we found that Egypt has adopted economic reforms talking about liberalizing the currency rate, and things would improve for 2 or 3 years and things would go back to square one. Why? Because we did not reform the sectors that give sustainability to the Egyptian economy. On top of them is industry. And that's why the president, since day one, told us how can we develop this very important field and support local industry and local manufacturing. Because when I look today at the balance of trade, we'll find that the imports we are receiving are not consumption commodities. Most of the imports are the inputs to our industries. If I would not import them, factories won't operate. So I can turn it into local industries, and this is what we're working on now. And this was the initiative of the president, not just to give plots of land, but establish industrial clusters and industrial zones for SMEs. And Dr. Naveen Gama, when she starts talking about it, she will talk about the initiative of the Egyptian banks, so that young people would be able to establish small and medium enterprises instead of importing the screw, the nail, the inputs of manufacturing a fridge. I would manufacture them here. So I'm introducing a whole system to import the inputs or manufacture them here and also create job opportunities. This is what we are working on now, and it's done on the ground along with a new system for land provision. And its main aim is to have new lands for industries and people, when they want to take it, they would go to one place, have one license, and all this would be linked to the demand on industrial lands and the industrial development system. Thank you very much. In the beginning of this session, the discussion was evaluating the economic reform program. A number of recommendations were given to the four parties in this session, be it the Coordination Office of Political Parties, the Simulation Government, the Egyptian government, and the experts. And they all expressed their opinions and they were sent to the jury. Now I would like to ask the jury to read these recommendations. According to the discussions that took place between the representatives of the government and the simulation government, as well as the experts and researchers, regarding the first session under the title Evaluating the Economic Reform Program in Egypt 2014-2019, first, the government applies austerity measures aiming at reducing government expenses, especially under Chapter 2 for the procurement of services and commodities, and fourth chapter, the subsidy, as well as expanding the provisions of Chapter 6, the purchase of non-financial assets and investment. Secondly, suggesting turning the structure of general debt to long-term instead of short-term and allocating them for investment expenditure rather than current account, using the short-term external debts by long-term debts so that the burden would be reduced and they can be distributed over a larger number of years. Thirdly, attracting more local and foreign investments to transformational industry sector, as the sector is the one capable of providing decent, sustainable job opportunities for the Egyptians that would improve the standard of living and reduce unemployment rates. Fourth, regular revision of investment promotion programs and increasing real estate investment, as well as overcoming all legal difficulties in this field. Also, developing mortgage investment through depending on long-term loans. Fifth, giving priority to the preliminary subscription file in the Egyptian stock market and having a special department to provide technical support to the listed companies in the field of disclosure and governance and the investors' relations, and increasing the number of companies that can be listed according to the emerging market standards. More investments in digital transformation and renewable energy projects, as well as waste recycling, due to its important economic and environmental impacts that would contribute to economic development. Other group of suggestions. The members of the parliament would study in cooperation with the political parties and the civil society the suggestion of issuing laws to encourage the Egyptian family to deal with the issue of overpopulation. Cooperation between Al-Azhar, the Ministry of Endowment, and civil society organizations to develop the religious social discourse regarding the issue of population and giving more attention to poor areas, giving priority to assimilating the informal sector in the digital transformation systems through financial inclusion programs to increase the tax revenues of the state. Developing a national comprehensive plan including different tools for enhancing the image about Egypt abroad, including different fields, investment, tourism, aviation, up till the regional and international roles. finally thinking of a proposal to establish an Egyptian council for the soft power, including different ministries and institutions as well as private marketing companies that would build a vision about Egypt and improve the reputation of Egypt abroad. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, the experts from the Egyptian Center for Strategic Studies, the jury. And by this, we've come to the end of this session. And now we'll give the floor to the President to comment on the recommendations. Thank you. I would like to say that when the simulation government talked and when we talked, we said that we were doing measures in light of ordinary conditions, but this was not the case. We were doing these measures, these courageous measures, in light of a state that has been through 2 revolutions in 3 years. So when we were doing this, what was our starting point? I talked about this before during the previous conferences, but I need to remind myself and you, did we start the solution in normal circumstances, or were we doing it in light of very difficult conditions, a lot of challenges, be it political, economic, or social, or security, or even cultural, or religious? One of the recommendations said that the Ministry of Endowment, along with Al-Azhar and the Parliament, would discuss and endorse laws to convince the families of family planning to reduce overpopulation. We started it in Egypt in light of a lot of challenges, and after 5 years, thanks to God and to the sacrifices of the people of Egypt, we are in a very different position. I'm not saying this because I'm the president. If I would talk about the infrastructure and how the government dealt with the data, how many kilometers of road, you've talked about 1,000, 2,000, or 3,000, or 7,000, or 8,000. I wish that we, the government, would revise these figures. The Ministry of Housing and the Ministry of Transportation and the Armed Forces can talk about the roads. Our plan is 8,000 kilometers, and we're not talking about 1 lane road. We're talking about 8,000 kilometers of roads that range between 3 to 6 lanes per direction. So if the average is 5 lanes, we're talking about 40,000 kilometers. How much to do this cost? Just to do the procedures for improving roads infrastructure in Egypt, we're talking about 360 billion Egyptian pounds. We talk about electricity. You were in a position where you did not have electricity, and now you say that you have surplus of more than 20%. After the maximum load, you have excess 20% that can be exported through electrical connection with neighboring countries like Saudi Arabia or Cyprus or Jordan. So do not forget where were we?
احنا كنا في وضع تاني خالص.
We were in a totally different position.
على وشك الانهيار.
We were a state about to collapse.
والشعب كان فاقد الامل والثقة.
And a nation that has no hope in a better future. So we needed to reconstruct the impression of the Egyptians and build their confidence in their ability to achieve this better future. So the plan was done in these circumstances, and all the colleagues in November 2016, when we were taking this decision, they were all worried about the reaction. And they are here with us today. And in the vote, they were all worried. Yes, they were afraid, because this is our country. And we fear for it. If something would happen, it would collapse and get destroyed. So they were all worried and concerned. I told them no, and I'll say exactly what I said back then. I said the government should be ready. If the people would refuse, then it would resign on Thursday. And on Saturday, I would do early presidential elections. Either we would construct the state correctly and solve our problems rightly, or let's leave it. Maybe it's unsuitable to mention this, but the colleagues in the cabinet said no. And they said, let's keep it after 19th of November, if you can remember. I said no. Before the 19th of November. I said so not because I was confident in myself. I was confident about the Egyptians and the will of the Egyptians to change. That's why when I say, I did not comment on what you said, but when I say that I would like to express my gratitude for what you did, because when I used to visit any country, your reaction to the economic reform was appreciated by all the other countries. They used to say, people in Egypt can endure all these things and all these procedures. It was an honor. So thank God that the results are better now. I understood then that our devotion and work would reap its fruit. Each president and each ministry exerted all its efforts at the time, and they are still doing it up till now, so as to reduce the burden shouldered by the people. The Ministry of Social Solidarity, that we would have a certain target, but for this plan, she said, I need to do it in 1 year. And we've talked about millions of Egyptian families that were targeted. And we started giving them this amount, although it is not that big, but we were just trying to support them. The Minister of Supply, Dr. Alim Salhi, wanted to be ready. When I used to talk to him, he would tell me, for sugar, I have 5 months, for rice, it's 6 months. I'm replying to our colleague in the simulation government who talked about if we have a problem, how we would solve it. There is a state, of course, with you, and I'm saying to the young people, go get ready so that you would join us. That you would know what countries do. Some talked about government marketing and promotion, and we said that there are certain things that we cannot mention on air. I would just like to tell you, they used to tell me, we feel that people do not recognize the achievements. I used to say them, I disagree with you. They would ask why. I would tell them, how many millions are working in all the projects from Upper Egypt till Alexandria. In the package of projects we did, whether you call it national projects or infrastructure projects, I think about 5 million are working in these projects. So each one of them is a media channel for his neighbors, his family and relatives. He would say, I'm working in Ismailia on this project, we're doing so and so. So even if we have any reservation on the media that it was not able to deliver this, and I'm not defending media, but there has been great change in media over the past 10 years. And television and radio now is not the only channel to deliver messages to the people. There are a lot of other things. And we need to keep pace with these developments and to send messages to the people and reassure them that we are on the right track in a way suitable to this age. A lot of colleagues would say, we've noticed that the state was not giving attention to a lot of side talks. And one of the colleagues said, it's as if the surgeon is doing a critical surgery for the patient to save him. And people around him are screaming and shouting. If he would leave the patient and talk to those who are shouting, the patient would die. He knows what he's doing exactly, and any recommendation that would be written here or said, for it to be done, it takes billions of Egyptian pounds. Since you want to know how things are done and calculated, if the water that comes to Egypt is below certain levels, I don't know whether I should say this or not. Let me explain it. This would affect the delta and the agricultural lands in Egypt, either preventing planting 1 or 2 million fiddans, and you can expect that if we have 1 or 2 million fiddans that are not cultivated, then what would happen to the farmers, the owners of these lands, and how these families would suffer if this is the case. Someone might ask me, do you mean that to solve this problem in a way or another, you had to spend more than, and Dr. Mustafa can correct me if I'm wrong, 70 billion pounds to build treatment plants for water recycling, then this title it might be just a recommendation that the state of Egypt need to benefit from the wastewater and treat this wastewater. To do this, and I have the resources to spend 70 billion pounds over 2 years to do tertiary treatment plants to enable me to use wastewater again. What about the culture of the Egyptians? Are they ready to accept this? The tertiary treatment, this is another challenge. People are not used to this. So I mean to say that each recommendation that might be written in a newspaper or in a program or in any of our conferences or meetings, for the state to do it, it takes a lot. You talked a lot about Sinai. And our colleague in the Ministry of Housing talked about Law 14, that the foreigners cannot own lands in Sinai. I've put this law when I was the Minister of Defense to protect land in Sinai. A lot of important things were mentioned, and during these sessions I have the opportunity to talk to you so that you would know that what you did and what the state of Egypt accomplished. And I'm swearing by God, I'm not exaggerating or making compliments. It's very great in comparison to how we were. Our conditions were very difficult, that weak performance in the state institutions over years, and this led to the aggravation of our problems in all sectors. And I mentioned before that go look at each sector and you will find things are very difficult. You will find, for example, that all houses are in red bricks. What does this mean? All houses and buildings in red bricks, and only the buildings constructed by the developers and the government are unlike that. And it seems that we've accepted ugliness and we forgot beauty. We accepted and got used to ugly images and forgot beauty. This reflects where did the state go. So all what I'm saying is that we did not start these procedures in ordinary circumstances. If you come to talk about Indonesia, Malaysia, Brazil, Mexico, Argentina, these countries are doing this in normal cases and not getting out of revolutions. So for any procedure you're doing, you need to be aware of the reaction of people. The last thing I would like to say, I liked very much the suggestion about Ras Al-Tin. And I like to say to the youth, we need to continue the studies, be it environment impact studies or other studies. For such a project, we need to do all these things, but this might be one of the recommendations. You're talking about investments of about 200 billion Egyptian pounds, and this is a very big amount, and I think that this would change this part of Alexandria, yet
ما تقوموا انتوا بتسويق هذا الموضوع.
Why don't you do the marketing for this? Why don't you market it amongst businessmen and investors? And I'm there to support you. The last point, a lot of the colleagues would say these new buildings in the new capital. What is in it for the citizen? Do you think that if you want to take an apartment in the capital, you did not take anything? What if you would work in it? Isn't this a job opportunity? If you would work on this in this place, would this place work on its own? Doesn't need people to construct, to operate and to work. People who would live in it is just part of it, but people who would do all this work, and the 5 million who are still working on these projects, they are working as a result of these projects. And so the citizen can take maybe 100 or 150 Egyptian pounds wages daily so that he would support his family. We need to understand that people are more aware than our expectations, and they want to earn their living, and if we are able to help them do it, then we have succeeded with our mission. Once more, I totally appreciate all the efforts, and I consider that this conference is an opportunity for us to meet, talk to each other, and also for the Egyptians to see us and to see what we are doing and how we talk to each other. Are we doing it aggressively, blaming and accusing each other, or can we speak for the progress of Egypt? I thought that this comment was a bit lengthy, yet I would like to thank you all, the government, the simulation government, and the Prime Minister for all the efforts they exert. And we're talking about 14 cities. We will inaugurate first New Aswan, then West Qina, then New Asyut, then El-Fashna, and then the Delta, Mansoura, Rashid, East Port Said, El-Alamein. Would I be in El-Mansura and go for a vacation to Alexandria, or would I go to the new city that is built in Mansoura? Dr. Mustafa told me that all the apartments built in Mansoura are sold. People are not poor as you think. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. President Al-Fatah El-Sisi, for attending the first session of the simulation of the State of Egypt. And now we are still going on with the simulation session for the State of Egypt, and we will move on immediately to a number of files like the evaluation of the social protection procedures. Would you please remain seated?